Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving Podcast. My name is Ashley, and I am your host today. I hope you're having a great day. I just can't thank you enough for being here, for taking the time to listen to our podcast. We really do appreciate you. Today, I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Robin Jeep. She was a gourmet chef to the stars in Los Angeles when a serious accident in 2002 triggered gut health and autoimmune issues. So Robin has this incredibly unique story about really finding a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and she is using that in her own personal way to help heal herself of decades of issues that she has suffered with. And so I do want you to keep that in mind, that everyone's story, everyone's journey is unique, and we have to find what is best for us, what we believe is best for us to help heal ourselves. So as she was going through all of these health issues and autoimmune issues, she was searching for answers. She ended up reading Dr. Joel Fuhrman's #1 New York Times best-selling book called Eat to Live. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but we do talk about Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Robin worked very, very closely with him, and she has a lot of fun things to say about that whole situation. But after reading that book, she transitioned to a whole food plant-based lifestyle in order to survive. She was literally knocking on death's door. This led to her working with Dr. Fuhrman as a dietary assistant, a patient coach, and food formulator. At his clinic, she helped people reverse numerous chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and autoimmune diseases just from eating plants. Robin literally is, with listening to her story as I was interviewing her, I was like, wow, you are showcasing the power of plant-based eating, the power that it can have on your health. Since then, she's authored the Super Antioxidant Diet book. She's educated people around the world, and she has launched several whole food plant-based restaurants and meal delivery services. I'm telling you, and I think she says this in the podcast interview, Robin's 68 years old, and I'm telling you, her career, which we kind of go through, like the different stages that she had in her life, is fascinating. And she has just done stuff all over the world, which is really, really cool. So Robin has a unique ability to make plants taste indulgent, which I know is something she's very, very proud of. Robin lives somewhat off the grid in the Ozarks. So as you can imagine, internet connection was a little spotty. So there are a couple points in our interview where it might be a little difficult to understand what we're saying, but I think overall you'll be able to get the message of what we're trying to convey. So please join me in welcoming Robin to the show. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited that you are joining us from Missouri. Is that right?
That's correct, the Ozarks.
Okay, all right. And I would love for you to just kind of give us a little background on yourself. Not too much, because we're going to go into some detail later, but maybe just a brief background, a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your situation, because I know that you live a little differently than most people in the US.
I do. I've been whole food plant-based for about 20 years now. And I have worked with Joel Fuhrman, Dr. Fuhrman, and I teach. I'm actually a patient advocate, and I specialize in GI health. And I'm a nutritarian educator. And then I have a company. I'm a co-founder of a company called Enliven Foods, where we're making whole food plant-based products. So I'm completely immersed in the whole food plant-based revolution.
You really are. And you've been in it for such a long time. I mean, a lot of people, they're maybe just starting their plant-based journey. I know a lot of our
Right.
listeners are kind of just getting started. So you bring only 2 decades of expertise to this show. So I can't wait to learn more about how you got into it. And I know you have a unique story about how you got into it. So maybe if you could go back a little bit and kind of tell me how becoming whole food plant-based sort of came about for you.
Well, how I got whole food plant-based was really because I had health issues. And I had health issues from my childhood. So my father was a cattle rancher. And so we grew up on a very meat-heavy diet. He was from Nebraska. So we did the corn-fed aged beef, which was the most delicious beef. And my mother was a gourmet cook. And so I grew up on very, very rich, meat-heavy meals. We did eat vegetables, though, so I love vegetables. And then I started, from a childhood on, I started having health issues. I had headaches. I just had general malaise. I missed a lot of school. I had stomach cramping, lower abdominal stomach cramping, but I didn't want anybody to know because I was an active child. I had my own horses and I just didn't want to be slowed down. So I kept everything secretive. And then as I got older, things progressed and got worse and worse. And that was how I got into this, because it was suggested about 20 years ago, it was suggested that this might help me. And it changed everything.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I know a lot of people can relate to that story. And I can as well. Of you have these health issues, especially as a kid, you don't really want to tell anybody. You kind of keep them secret. And then once you become an adult, you're like, I can't spend the next 20 years, the next 30 years living like this.
No, because what gets worse, it just progresses.
Yeah.
Where you know, you can't keep it a secret. And that's kind of what happened to me. Is because I had learning disabilities, and I actually dropped out of school when I was in actually ninth grade was my last year of high school, because I had such problems.
Yeah.
And then I became a model. And so at 19, I became a model, and it was living in New York City and in Europe. And then I married an Austrian prince. And then the food orgy, just the rich, decadent food orgy, just continued. Yeah. And I'm still trying to hide these GI problems. I didn't really know. I kind of just assumed everybody had this. I just didn't talk about it, but I had issues, I can remember.
Oh, yeah.
And then and things just got progressively worse. Then I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I had terrible PMS. I mean, horrible PMS. I mean, it was like almost at least 2 to 3 weeks out of the month, I had issues from hormonal stuff. And then I was put on all these medications to try to treat this stuff. And then that just made my brain all foggy and stuff. And it was then a woman who was whole food plant-based. This was back in 2001. She saw me. She was selling flowers. It was in LA. I was working as a private chef for a celebrity in LA. And she saw me, and she had all these flowers outside this store in Beverly Hills, this grocery store where I shop. And it was amazing, because it was just, there were hundreds and hundreds of flowers. And she was a very startling, attractive woman. She had white hair and crystal clear blue eyes. And I looked around, and those flowers had never been there before. And I said, "What's this?" And she said, "Well, I'm selling flowers." And I said, "Really?" I said, "I've never seen this before." And she looked at me and she said, "I can help you get off all those medications." And I was like, "What? How did she know I take medications?" And I said, "Really?" And I was interested. So I started talking to her. Well, then she put me on a whole food plant-based diet. Wow. That was when I first got started on this. And then the migraines went away. And I really think those were probably from dairy. Mm-hmm. So the migraines immediately went away. And that was, so that was my first real experience with that. Prior to that, I had worked for Whole Foods Market. I was a marketing director for Whole Foods Market. And back in those days, before Whole Foods went public, the store was completely different. And they had all this huge herbal section with all these bulk herbs. It was amazing. And they would have herbalists working in there. And I got really interested in plant medicine with herbs at that time. So I was kind of primed for all this, and I had a real interest for it. And what I think is that I had a real scientific bent, but because I had such learning disabilities, I never got to pursue it. So it was amazing. Learning this stuff I have like a photographic memory for it. And of course, my mind is clear.
How did that go? You were raised on a ranch, having a lot of just health issues in general. You get into modeling, you're over in Europe, you're in New York, and then you end up becoming a celebrity chef. How did that kind of all transpire? Because I know that you've worn many hats in your career days.
My husband and I divorced, and I had a small child. And so I knew that I was living with my parents, but I didn't want to keep doing that. So I knew I needed something that would be a more substantial income and consistent. So I used to do a lot of dinner parties, a lot of cooking and fancy dinner parties and stuff, and I started teaching cooking classes. European style cooking classes, and people were asking me to cater. And so finally I started a catering business and became very successful in Texas. In Central Texas, I had a huge catering business and did the most decadent imperial foods that you could imagine. I mean, it's rich. And so I did that. And I, of course, ate those foods. Lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, but lots of creams and butters and just richness. And because, that's what bangs the pleasure center in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that. I mean, I didn't understand it then, but I knew people would book me for catering jobs. And so I did that. And then I ended up out in LA. I actually sat down with my sister and decided I wanted to figure out, a dream job. And it was to go and be a private chef. I'd read about that. So I read ads in the Wall Street Journal, and I got a job as a private chef for a billionaire in Laguna Beach, he and his wife. And so I started the whole private chef journey, working for these high-end people and then celebrities. And I've loved food, obsessed with food, loved chocolate, all that stuff. And then I got into the plant-based eating because it helped me with my health. So I would kind of go back to my old way of eating, back and forth, flip-flopping. And this kept on until I had a very serious horseback riding accident. I continued to train horses as a hobby. And I was doing that in Los Angeles, in Topanga, which is part of Los Angeles. And a horse I was training reared up and went over backwards. It was up in the mountains and shattered my pelvis. It was a 2-year-old thoroughbred. Shattered my pelvis, broke both my hip joints, fractured my sacrum, internal injuries, and severed arteries. So it was bad, but I was in the hospital for 3.5 weeks. And because I was so physically fit, they didn't have to do any surgery. I just had to stay flat on my back. And it was after I got out of the hospital that all of a sudden I started having GI issues that were way beyond what I'd had before. And they were all kind of like up here in my esophageal area at this point. Well, they were there all the way.
Yeah.
And the doctors couldn't help me. I went to many, many doctors. And that was when I was a private chef. Again, I was a private chef for another billionaire. And he gave me Joel Fuhrman's book to read because he wanted me to cook that way. And so I started cooking that way. I really started learning the science and really got it. And I was so excited about it that I quit my job as a private chef and did a website all based on Joel Fuhrman. And then I called and talked to them. We had a mutual friend. I talked to his wife, Lisa, and we had a mutual friend, Peter Max, who was a famous artist in the 60s and 70s. And I think in the 70s, not the 60s. And so they ended up asking me to come. I wrote a kind of a business plan summary, and then Joel asked me to come. And so I went out there. I did all the recipes at that time, and I started coaching his patients. I started the first coaching plan there. And then I taught cooking classes there and traveled with Joel. And so I lived with the Fuhrmans, and Joel saved my life. He helped me so much because he taught me, because I couldn't eat like everybody else because I was so damaged.
Yeah.
And such trauma. He taught me all these tips, which a lot of them I share with, people who have GI issues. And then I've learned a lot more. I always credit him with saving my life. It was because here I was living with the doctor. So he would check on me every evening, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. And then I worked for him for about 2 years, and then I became his dietary assistant. The business expanded, and before the business was just in the basement of his house, and then we moved into a whole clinic and everything. So it was very exciting and amazing.
Yes. And what an exciting time to be a part of his journey too. And I mean, him being a part of your journey, because like you said, he saved your life.
He did save my life, and I will always be grateful to Joel.
Yeah.
So I got off all my prescription medications. I was on so many because I had, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was on lithium. I was on antidepressants.
Yeah.
I was on even Neurontin, a nerve thing. I mean, I was on hormones. I had to do injections, Imitrex injections for my migraine headaches. I had to take Librax for my IBS. I mean, I was on so many prescription medications. So I was able to get off all of that. No prescription medications. I have no migraines or mood swings. I don't even have IBS. I mean, not IBS. I don't have bipolar disorder.
Wow.
I always carried like 10 to 15 pounds extra weight. That all came off. And I had to just constantly watch my weight, having to starve myself one day and
Right.
be
Yep.
the next. And it's one of the most wonderful things. It's giving me such a deep purpose in my life and creating this business.
Yeah.
That is the most fulfilling thing in the world, is to feel like you have real purpose in helping people.
I probably should have asked you this sooner. For those of us who are listening who are not familiar with Dr. Fuhrman, would you mind just to kind of explaining who he is and what he does?
Dr. Fuhrman he's got a bunch of his books up there. He's got 7 New York Times bestsellers. He's had his own PBS show. He's a medical doctor, and he's one of the earliest pioneers really in this whole food plant-based movement. And he has his way of eating. Well, here's an old book that's now reprint, as you can see. This was the book I had originally. And he coined a term called nutritarian. So his diet is a little different than just a whole food plant-based diet. It is based on eating for nutrient density, and that's mostly micronutrient density, which means vitamins, minerals, plant chemicals, antioxidants, and it's all from a whole food diet. So it's going to be the bottom of his pyramid are like green leafy vegetables, then other low carb vegetables, and then going up to starchy vegetables, and then going up to beans, nuts and seeds, and so forth. And what's a little different from he himself is not an advocate of eating meat, but he understands that it's very difficult for people to just come off of eating meat. So he will allow, because he's always looking at the science. He doesn't really have an agenda. He's looking at the science, and he has found that if you eat, he says it looks like under 5 ounces of lean, grass-fed, the organic animal products, 5 ounces a week, it's pretty much the same as eating a nutritarian vegan diet. So that means you only use a little bit of meat to flavor your soups or something. It's a tiny amount. And so most people who do this end up just, why bother?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Why bother at all? 5 ounces, like, is it really that important?
Anyway, he just focuses on the really the nutrient dense foods and making sure that it's macronutriently adequate, meaning protein, carbohydrate, and fat, that's adequate, and that your micronutrients are abundant.
Yeah. Which is kind of the opposite of the way our society is. We're incredibly macro focused. We're obsessed with protein, especially. I know you know that.
Yes.
And carbs and fat. We kind of lose sight of micronutrients, these really important things in food that, like, you changed your life, changed my life, and have a massive impact on our health and how we feel.
That's so true. It is. I mean, it does. It's, as I've journeyed through this, and well, I ought to go into some of my stuff. When I had my accident, I've never returned completely to normal. And so when you go on some of these things, what they do is they reduce your stomach acid to the point where you can get bacterial infections, fungal infections, parasites, you can get all kinds of stuff. So I got all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it made me very, very sick. I mean, to the point where I was going to die. I've had to go to a lot of doctors, mostly the integrative and functional medicine doctors. I try to find the ones that have a lot of clinical experience, because there are a lot of newbies out there that just don't know that much yet. And I don't want to be an experiment. Yep. So I've had to do a lot of that. My GI tract is still such that I eat a different kind of diet. I eat mostly cooked vegetables. I have food sensitivity, so I react to a lot of foods. That's kind of what happened after I had the accident. I react to fruits. I can't eat fruits. I can only nuts and seeds on occasion. So my diet consists mostly of cooked vegetables and beans, or legumes, and certain legumes, because I'll react to a lot of them. So through this, I've had to really determine, and now I'm able to eat some raw vegetables, which is great, some salad. But I've been able to determine what is really required to survive and thrive. The greens are vitally important. The greens I must eat, I don't know, maybe 10 cups 8 to 10 cups of, if you chop raw greens, I mean, I cook them, but probably 10 cups of raw greens a day, all different kinds.
Yeah.
Because those are your most micronutrient dense foods. And then I eat a lot of starchy vegetables. I eat a lot of potato, a lot of sweet potato. I eat turnips, root vegetables. So I eat a lot of starchy vegetables. I cannot eat grains. Unfortunately, I love grain, but I can't eat it. So I've had to find things that work, and I get plenty of protein. I take certain supplements. I can't take a lot of supplements because I react, but I take methyl B12. Definitely got to get the B12. I take iodine, kelp iodine. I take algae-based DHA, EPA, and I take vitamin D. So those are the supplements that I'm able to take. So that's why I went into coaching people, because a lot of people, when they try to do a plant-based diet, a lot of people have GI issues, as you know, and they'll try to do a plant-based diet and they can't handle it. They literally can't handle it. Their GI tract just can't handle it. So that's where I help them to transition, and I figure out a diet plan that will work for them, and can determine what's kind of a food sensitivity, what's because the GI tract is sluggish because it's not used to all this fiber. And so I help people with that.
Yeah. Which I feel like that's so needed, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go plant-based. It's going to be an easy fix.
Right.
I'm going to feel better. And for a lot of people, that's not the case.
This next generation, the science is showing that the next generation, the generation that's coming up now, is going to have a shorter lifespan than their parents. It'll be the first time that this has happened. Wow. And so that's what I'm seeing, is that this younger generation, the millennials, they're starting to have, and even younger, are starting to have really they can't digest this food.
Yeah, because we had Dr. Robin Chutkan on recently, and she talked about something similar. She speaks about how your immune system, a large part of it is in your gut, and that impacts all these things that you're saying, how we respond to different diseases and illnesses, including COVID. And that can have, again, a large impact in how your body responds to different things like that are thrown at you.
That's why I say run, don't walk, to start eating this way. And I wrote this book in 2008, which is still a real good book. The only thing that's dated in it is the vitamin D recommendations. Back then it was 400 IUs a day. I now take anywhere from 5 to 10,000 IUs a day. One of the things I noticed in my coaching, and that's the pleasure trap, that when you are, and it takes about really a good year to transition to this whole food plant-based eating, as I'm sure you know, and you'll still, it takes years where you don't even want the other stuff anymore. But that year can be tough, because you still keep wanting the higher fat, the sweeter, the more indulgent tasting foods. And so that was why I came up with Enliven Foods. I started making these muffins. I've had whole food plant-based restaurants and so forth, and we used to sell a lot of these whole food plant-based muffins. And so I came up with these because, being a chef and being a gourmet chef, because I was trained, all that stuff, I understand the palate, I understand food chemistry, and I know how to make plant foods taste really indulgent. So something like this really will help you as you're transitioning to whole food plant-based eating. And then, of course, it's a wonderful treat after you've transitioned, because it's actually good for you. It's not going to harm you. It's good for you. It's got micronutrients in it. It's got all the fiber. It's got the legumes. It's got all the good stuff in it that can keep you going. It can be, we call them mug muffin meals, because it can keep you going as a small meal. And one of the things I was thinking about this, one of the things that I learned from Joel that I think is the most important thing that I learned, and it's going to have to do with this, is when he has a soup made every day or every couple of days. They make a vegetable legume soup in their house, and it's filled with kale, all different kinds of vegetables, starchy vegetables, whatever, just all the low carb vegetables, the leafy greens, and some kind of legume, and seasoned up nicely. And they make that every day, or they had a big family at the time they had 4 kids. So we went through stuff pretty fast. Then they had me there too. But they have that in the refrigerator. So you can eat as much of that as you want. And that's what I've taught a lot of my students. Make this soup, whether it means ripping open a bag of frozen vegetables, chopping up some cabbage, and make this soup. And you can dump organic canned beans in there. Make this soup, have it in your refrigerator. It will satisfy you. Once you get, and you can put flax seeds, ground flax seeds on top of it, hemp seeds, whatever, put the fat into it. You start to get hungry, you start to crave some bad stuff, go have a bowl of this soup, and you really won't want anything else. My smoothies have legumes in them. That's the trick, is you put legumes in this, because a smoothie will bump your blood sugar up. You'll get a blood sugar spike from a fruit smoothie. But if you put like half a cup of canned beans in there, you won't really taste them, but it'll make everything, you won't get the blood sugar spike.
Yeah, that's a great little tip.
Yes, it's incredible. So it'll like when you drink a smoothie, you'll oftentimes be real hungry like an hour or hour and a half later. Well, that's the blood sugar spike. And so you don't get that when you put the beans in there.
And I was going to say, for you listening, there you go. There's a little idea that you can take with you on the next time you make a smoothie. Add like a half a cup of beans in there, quarter cup, and just see what you think. See how maybe your body responds to that.
Yeah, you just start small, especially if you're not used to eating beans. And then the other big tip is Dr. Fuhrman's, that soup. Having that soup at all times available. That will really help you.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, because you're basically taking the resistance or that friction to eat plant-based. You're basically taking it away, because that convenience factor of having that soup already prepped, already made, it makes it so easy to make that choice.
And if you're wanting something sweet, you have fruit. Well, that's kind of how I came up with this for my students, because I always had this. I would do diets. I would put people on a diet plan, and then we would do the diets for them. And some of them, we had a delivery service and so forth. So we would do the muffins. And so they would get these wonderful nutrient dense muffins. And if we forgot their muffin, they called us. We had to go deliver their muffins, because they said, you can't do this to me.
Yeah.
I'm eating a bunch of vegetables and beans here. I want my muffins. So we came up with these muffins, which really are kind of similar to the soup, because it's got legumes in it, which is a resistant starch, which is going to slow everything down a little bit and give you what's called the second meal effect, so that the resistant starch keeps you full for a long time. So it's got the vegetables in there, it's got the resistant starch, it's got fruit, it's sweet. And so I tell you, you eat one of these things, you'll be full. Like a big man could eat two and he would be full.
Mm-hmm.
So that's because, they contain dates. This one has real cacao nibs, which is a big secret in flavor. I mean, this thing is like something in a fancy gourmet restaurant. This chocolate one, the flavors are amazing. Then this has got dried tart cherries. It's got some stevia sweetened chocolate chips, and I think we may be able to change that to chocolate chunks made just from cacao nibs, ground cacao nibs, and date powder. So we're looking into that. And then it's got it'll have aluminum free baking powder, flaxseed, coconut, kale powder, it has chickpea flour in there, which are really the same as eating chickpeas, and almond flour. And that's all that's in these things. You get this bag, and it's going to make 4 of mix into your mug or into a souffle cup, or custard cup, whatever you want to put it in. And then you put 1/4 cup of water into it and mix it. Put it in the microwave for 60 to 90 seconds, depending on how you like yours. The longer, the cakier it is. And then you pull it out. It's steaming hot, and the aroma's incredible. I mean, it's amazing. 60 to 90 seconds. And then, so we've got this one, the cacao cherry crave, which is by far the most decadent one. And then they're all pretty decadent tasting. And then this one is the sweet potato sunrise, which is kind of like a carrot cake. It's got spice. It's got a lot of cinnamon and raisins in it. And then this one is Island Chai Spice, which has all the chai spices, lots of coconut, and it also has added turmeric in there. And so that one's really delicious. And it's got pineapple, dried pineapple.
Nice.
A lot of dried pineapple. And then this one is the savory chipotle veggie. And this one's just a little bit spicy. and it's got they all have the chickpeas in them. And this one's got cabbage and all kinds of vegetables in it. And it's got mushrooms. It's got a lot of mushrooms in it. It's really tasty. So, I mean, you could easily have like this as your main course one, and then have a dessert. They're fantastic. They're really good.
So basically, for those of you who are listening and not watching, what Robin's holding up is essentially like a package, like you would buy like a package of flour, but it's a muffin mix, and you can just add it into, like she said, like a mug or some sort of ceramic device, and then add your water and throw it in the microwave, and you're good to go. So, I mean, it looks very, very convenient to make, which is really great.
We've been working on this for 2 years, and I tell you, that's been something going through COVID and everything, trying to do all of this. But anyway, we've done it. We stuck with it, and we've done it. And so the Kickstarter is going to happen January 10th. And Kickstarter, for those who don't know, is a platform that launches people's new products and concepts and ideas. And what happens is you take your product, and then you can go there, and and there are different rewards. Like this one, you can just buy a box of one of each flavor, and you pre-order. And so what that does, we're trying to raise like $15,000, and that's going to pay for our production. And that's us producing in a certified kitchen, USDA certified kitchen. And so that will pay for that. If we get 30,000, then we can have it done with a co-packer, which we'd really like.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's to raise the money so that we can actually produce these things. And then you get the product, you get what you order, and we've got all kinds of boards. I mean, it goes to me being a private chef, having people come here. They stay in a wonderful, because I'm in the Ozarks, in a beautiful, like a log cabin house. And we come in, we do 4 days of me teaching, cooking, having wonderful gourmet meals, plant-based gourmet meals. I mean, everything from that to just, one of each of these. So there are all kinds of rewards, a mug, a handcrafted by a potter, artisan mug, they're just all these different rewards. So you order what you want. And if we don't get the money, let's say we didn't, but I'm sure we will, because Kickstarter is real successful. If we didn't get the money, you get your money back. So you're not really out anything. Okay. And then then you're going to get to try a new product, brand new product on the market. And so I wanted to tell everybody how to find out about us.
Okay.
Is you can you can sign up for our newsletter so that you'll know what's going on when it launches on January 10th. And that's at www.enlivenfoods.com. And there's info@enlivenfoods.com if you want to just send us an email and say, be sure to let us know about the Kickstarter. And then you can just Google Enliven Foods for Instagram and Facebook, because we have some great videos and stuff that we're starting to load. It's starting to get real exciting. Yeah. And then if anybody wants nutritional health coaching, you can go to www.robinjeep.com. And I do not charge a coaching fee. I just do it by donation, because I believe very strongly that this information is information. I'm so tired of medical, all this stuff, and paying so much money for everything, that I want people to have this information, and I can help them, and for free. And then they can just donate, what they can, and so forth. Wow. So that's it. That's separate. That's robinjeep.com. But then everything else about these wonderful products is enlivenfoods.com. And so so anybody who gets on our list, we'll be sending information out, because what we will be asking people to do is, if they can, when it launches on January 10th, it puts us up in the Kickstarter rankings, and then Kickstarter kind of promotes us if we can get a whole lot of orders on January 10th. Okay. So that's one of the things we'll be doing, is asking people, if they're going to order something, to order on January 10th, and we'll be able to remind people and help them to be able to do that. Okay. Yeah. If I could go back and give myself a piece of advice, it would be, do it as early as possible in life. Yeah. Don't walk, run to make this change.
Wow. Yes. Don't walk, run. I think that's beautifully stated. And I think most plant-based people can agree. I wish I would have done this sooner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do too. I wish I had.
Yeah. Yep. Me too. But Robin, I mean, you're doing to other people basically what Dr. Fuhrman did to you. I mean, you're really helping people change their lives around for the better, because so many people are out here, they're sick, and they don't realize that food can play such an important role in helping them get their health back.
Right. They don't. People, one of the things I realize, I talk to people with heart disease and other things, and they can't comprehend that food can really make such a difference. They think it needs to be big, powerful drugs that need to pound them. It couldn't possibly be, a piece of kale. They can't. We've been so programmed that they can't. This is just out of their frame of reference. And so what you're doing by getting this out there and getting people like me and others, because we may know all this stuff and have all this information, but unless we can get it out there, nobody else will be able to get it out there.
Yeah. Yep. It's true.
I mean, nobody else will be able to learn about it.
Yep. And we'll include all those links that Robin mentioned in the show notes. So that way you can just click below this podcast and check everything out. If you want to connect with Robin, you can do that. And then check out the Kickstarter and everything else. We have all that explained for you below. So it's really easy to access. Robin, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your enthusiasm for whole food plant-based living.
And thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you for this and everything you do.
Thank you. All right. We'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep thriving.